What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. So Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant are set for an undisputed super middleweight title bout. It's supposed to be November 6th, so they've agreed to the terms, and this is for all of the 168-pound belts, which was Canelo's plan, right? This is what he and his team declared when they fully started to invade the 168-pound division. Not when they first danced up there a little bit with Rocky Fielding, where Canelo stopped him in a few rounds and then went back to 160 and then went to 175 to fight Kovalev. No, this is where he had kind of planted his flag in there, said, I want to win all of the belts in this division. So I'm going to do a full preview on this fight as we get closer to the fight day, but I just want to give my initial thoughts, and I wanted to hold off on the initial thoughts because I knew that there would be some serious negotiating taking place before this was actually agreed upon, especially when you're dealing with cross-promotional issues, right? This is going to be a PBC pay-per-view affair. So Canelo Alvarez is fresh off of his Billy Joe Saunders win, right? Where he captured the WBO belt to add to his WBA belt and WBC belt, which he got both of those belts against Callum Smith 2 fights prior. Remember, he fought Avni Yildirim in between, a total mismatch. But when he fought Callum Smith, I thought that he could have potentially been in a lot of danger because of Callum Smith's size and the quality of fighter that he was. Now, I thought that Canelo would win, but I thought that Callum Smith was really going to give Canelo some problems, and he did not. Callum Smith hasn't been in the ring since. He's got a fight scheduled finally, but Canelo Alvarez really beat the hell out of Callum Smith. He even messed up his arm by targeting his arm when Callum Smith would keep the high guard. Basically, if you can't penetrate the guard, hit the guard. And that in itself was effective. And he just walked Callum Smith down that entire fight. So Canelo has been looking like a total bull at 168 now, which, if you remember him at 154 or even 147 when he was like knocking out Carlos Baldomir back in the day, it would have been almost unfathomable that he would be wrecking shop at 168. 160? Maybe. I mean, we saw him fight those 2 nearly even fights with Gennady Golovkin. I thought Triple G deserved the decision win in the first. I thought the second one could have been a draw. I thought that one could have gone either way. But Canelo Alvarez, at a point, was only fighting like the Miguel Cotto's at 160, which Miguel Cotto, if you know, he's never been a true 160. Hell, Miguel Cotto was never really a true 154. You know, Miguel Cotto was a 140 guy who, got solid and became a true 147 guy. But in his later stages, after getting stopped by Antonio Margarito in a highly controversial fight, Miguel Cotto would then mess with 154 and then 160. Well, when Canelo was first selecting his 160 tests, I was really questioning whether he could be a full-fledged 160 guy. Well, now he's at 168, and he's 1 fight away from earning all 4 titles over there. And this time, it's not going to be against Billy Joe Saunders. It's not going to be against Callum Smith. This one is against Caleb Plant. And a lot of people think that it's just going to be more of the same, meaning Canelo wins and it's not that controversial. Well, let's at least acknowledge that Caleb Plant is different, very different from the other guys Canelo's been fighting at 168. You could say, well, both Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders are kind of tricky boxers. Well, Billy Joe Saunders, first of all, was a 160, 154 guy. He was a smaller guy. He's 5'11". Caleb Plant's 6'1". Billy Joe Saunders was a kind of jazzy, slick, unorthodox southpaw. Very, very tricky. Caleb Plant is conventional, but if you compare like their reach, Billy Joe Saunders had a 71-inch reach. Caleb Plant's got a 74-inch reach. And again, we're talking 5'11 versus 6'1. So Caleb Plant, first off, is a big boy at 168. He's not as big as Callum Smith, but he's a lot more technical, moves a lot better, and he's a lot more active. Not to knock Callum Smith. Again, before Callum Smith got beaten up by Canelo, I thought Callum Smith, and he was an undefeated WBA champion and a very good fighter. Yes, Ryder gave him a lot of problems, but by and large, Callum Smith was about as good as it gets at 168. Well, Caleb Plant is you know, he's got all of the tools, and you watch him fight, and you could tell that he's a very scientific fighter. And unlike Callum Smith and Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant is kind of an outlier type athlete. If you look at some of the things that he could just do physically, the other guys can't do. And he's got a wicked left hook that could put you out. Callum Smith could put you out with his power too. Caleb Plant can as well. But when you look at Caleb Plant's resume, the way that he earned the title was against Jose Uzcategui, which in itself is not a bad thing. Uzcategui had his best, moments against Andre Dirrell, not Anthony Dirrell, who we recently saw lose against, David Benavidez, and has, I think, fought to a draw once since. Anthony Dirrell, if you're talking about career achievements between the Dirrell brothers, Anthony and Andre came in to the professional ranks as one of the highly touted prospects of the era. But I think Anthony Dirrell, you could argue, has actually had a better pro career. He's a two-time champion at 168. But a long in the tooth, or at least career-wise, fighting-wise, kind of an over-the-hill Andre Dirrell fought Uzcategui once. Andre Dirrell got hit at the bell. Uzcategui knocked him out. It was a disqualification, and then a brawl ensued to where, a couple of the Andre Dirrell camp people got arrested for the assaults taking place after that fight was called because of that knockout hit at the end of the bell, just after the bell. Well, since that controversial fight, they ran it back, and Uzcategui really just beat the brakes off of Andre Dirrell, leaving no question. And he walked away from that being the IBF Super Middleweight title holder. Well, 2 fights later, Uzcategui fights Caleb Plant, who had just beaten Porky Medina in his last fight. We're talking 2018. Plant fights Uzcategui in January of 2019 and just totally outclasses a pretty good athlete in Uzcategui. Uzcategui's going to be David Benavidez's next opponent, by the way. And Uzcategui's had a couple showings that weren't that impressive or promising after Uzcategui's loss to Caleb Plant for that IBF title. So I don't know where Uzcategui is career-wise anymore, but at the time that Uzcategui was defending his IBF title against Caleb Plant, Uzcategui was actually the favorite in that fight. He was a minus 380. Plant was a plus 260. So for anybody saying, Plant hasn't fought anybody, well, he was a big underdog against Uzcategui, and he ended up winning that fight via unanimous decision. It wasn't particularly close. We were, a lot of people were pretty surprised by how cleanly Caleb Plant was outboxing and outclassing Uzcategui. Impressive performance for Caleb Plant. I still think that was one of his best career showings to this day. Well, since then, he's had to defend that IBF title against Mike Lee, Vincent Feigenbutz, and Caleb Truax, who Caleb Truax did beat James DeGale on kind of over the hill post Badu Jack fight of the year type fight, James DeGale. But Caleb Truax has had a couple, good outings and has fought some of the best fighters of his generation. So Truax is a solid opponent. But again, Caleb Truax is about 40 years old himself. And so that is Caleb Plant's last fight. To be fair, Truax is 37, not 40. But he's kind of an over-the-hill fighter. He really didn't have much to bring to the table against Caleb Plant. Point being, since winning the IBF title, Caleb Plant really hasn't had to show up and show out a whole lot against any elite fighters to really stake his claim. So, there's a part of this whole Caleb Plant is actually competing to earn all 4 belts. That doesn't seem very just. Not to say that he doesn't have the skills, the talent, or the pedigree in terms of his amateur career and just working his way up the professional ranks. He's put in the work, and he's, battled back from a couple injuries and stuff. But I'm just saying, in terms of professional resume, this is hardly the type of fight-by-fight opponent quality that should put you in line to unify all 4 major belts at 168 to become undisputed. But that's kind of, this is a case of Caleb Plant being at the right place at the right time, with the right belt. Because Canelo is the one who brought the energy to 168 when he declared, I want to take all the titles. So all of a sudden, everybody at 168's ears perk up like, how can I get in position to fight Canelo Alvarez? Well, David Benavidez, you don't have a belt right now. He's never lost. He was a 2-time WBC 168-pound champ, Benavidez. didn't ever lose it in the ring. He lost it once because of non-performance enhancing drugs, just recreational drugs. And then he lost it the second time on the scale. So yeah, I'm sure he was really wishing he had that WBC title at the time Canelo came up. Big missed opportunity for David Benavidez, right? Because after Benavidez coughed up that title ended up being up for grabs as a vacant title when Alvarez fought Callum Smith. Callum Smith was a WBA belt holder, but the WBC belt was also up for grabs because it was vacated by David Benavidez. So Caleb Plant, on paper, really doesn't have nearly the resume. When you look at who Canelo's been fighting fight by fight for the past, 10 years, it's incomparable. You can't compare Alvarez and Plant's careers. And so there's a part of this opportunity for Plant that, I don't want to use the word undeserved, but if we're looking at it on paper, it kind of fits. But Caleb Plant, he's a Tennessee boy. He's a pretty raw dude. Like you hear him in interviews, kind of just see how he carries himself. You could tell that he's, cut from a pretty rugged cloth. You know what I mean? Like he is not any pushover. He is not a punk. He seems supremely confident, got a ton of self-belief. And again, he has outlier athleticism. This is going to be interesting, and I really want to see how this evolved Canelo Alvarez, who we've just seen improve fight over fight, year after year. Just the synergy between him and his training team, Eddie Reynoso. Canelo and Eddie have kind of built a culture that has been kind of a beacon of light for other Mexican fighters to come to and train at. Or, in the case of Frank Sanchez, I believe he's a Cuban fighter, right? I'm talking about the heavyweight who's about to fight against Ajagba on the Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 3 undercard. But yeah, Canelo Alvarez, his fighting spirit, his willingness to want to take on the best, very Manny Pacquiao, Oscar De La Hoya, I'll say Floyd Mayweather. I know a lot of people disagree, but that type of fighter who's willing to fight the best year in and year out over the course of their career. Canelo is really striving for greatness, and he's already achieved unbelievable greatness, but he's always just looking to kick it up a notch. And so now he's taking on Caleb Plant, who, again, very different from Billy Joe Saunders. They're both technical. They're both sweet science guys, but with some stark differences, both size-wise, style-wise, and their, orthodox versus southpaw, all that. We're going to get further into those when we break it down the line. And obviously, Caleb Plant is very different from Callum Smith. So this is going to be a very unique test. And I'd have to, look even more closely at who in Canelo's history is a little bit similar to Caleb Plant's fighting style. Maybe Daniel Jacobs being a big 6'1" type fighter, orthodox stance, but a defensively responsible, sweet science guy. So maybe Daniel Jacobs. First gut impression, I think Canelo wins this fight, but via decision. Shit, if he stops Caleb Plant, and he just stopped Avni Yildirim, stopped, Billy Joe Saunders. If he does that to the 168-pound division, my God, I don't think that he'll stop Caleb Plant. Caleb Plant moves really well, but they're going to have, there are going to be sparks that are going to be flying. Caleb Plant's going to look to land that left hook on Canelo. He's going to try to check him coming in. Canelo's about 5'8", 5'9". Again, we're talking 6'1". I don't think Canelo could just walk down a Caleb Plant like he could a Callum Smith. Totally different fighters that exhibit different levels of footwork. So, yeah, this is going to be a very fresh matchup. I know a lot of people didn't love this. A lot of people, for some reason, want to see Alvarez versus Triple G3. And it's not that I don't want to see it, but what has Triple G shown you since those two fights against Canelo? Again, the second fight was September 2018. Triple G has been very chippy. And, it's kind of heartbreaking that this is how things kind of culminated in Triple G's biggest moment, where he deserved that first win. Imagine how different the career trajectories between Triple G and Canelo would have been if Triple G got the split decision win in that first fight, and if it wasn't a split draw. You would have had a total different last 3 years, I would think, for Triple G. Every fight would have become a money fight for him. He wouldn't have been fighting the Cesar Rametas. he probably wouldn't have had to fight Derevianchenko, a good fighter, and I thought Derevianchenko beat Triple G. So Triple G's now like 38, 39. It's like, is that really the guy who you want to see Canelo fight again in 2021, 2022? But a lot of people seem to want that one still. I think it's just name recognition. They just don't know Jermall Charlo, Demetrius Andrade, Caleb Plant, David Benavidez, right? But I'm not mad at this Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Plant matchup. I'm very interested to see how this one unfolds. And who knows, if Canelo beats Caleb Plant, if he plans to truly campaign at 175 against the Dimitri Bivol, Joe Smith, and Artur Beterbiev, right? Yeah, but that's another conversation for another day. Let's take a look at Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Plant. I want your first reaction, first impressions. Who do you think wins this fight and how? I'd have to, again, I'm going to take a deeper analytical look and really kind of suss out who I think is going to take this one. But my gut says Canelo Alvarez via decision over Caleb Plant. But this is going to be a pretty interesting matchup, I believe. I don't think Canelo's just going to run roughshod over Caleb Plant. Let me put it that way. But yeah, let me know what you think about this one in the comments. I'm just glad they got it done. They need to get Terrence Crawford versus Sean Porter done. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.